Good evening all and welcome to the February 9th, 2021 open session meeting of the Ayer Planning Board starting at 6:15. I'm calling it to order. And I get to read this wonderful paragraph once again. I'm going to miss this eventually.
It never grows old.
I'm going to miss it eventually. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Baker issued an emergency order temporarily suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Public bodies otherwise governed by the open meeting law are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate alternative means. This meeting will be broadcast live on Channel 8 and on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by following the call-in information on the bottom of the live broadcast screen. For the Zoom meeting information relating to remote participation, please contact Cindy Knox. Please contact Cindy Knox, IT Director at cknox@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8252, or Heather Hampson, Administrative Coordinator at hampson@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8214 prior to the meeting. Thank you. Good evening, all. So, first order of business, approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Moved and second. Any discussion on the agenda? I'm looking at the wrong one. We had an updated one. Anyway. In order, Ms. Murray, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Krantz?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Ditskin?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Fantastic. So I apologize all. Here it is. I had too many agendas in front of me. First on our agenda is the John Carroll Reserve and Covenant Bond. Is everybody here for that? Go ahead, Mark, please.
Yeah, I'll address that. I spoke with Peter DeCarolis today, and I'll let him know that we are still in the process of putting this together. Barbara, the town accountant, put me in touch with Fidelity Bank, and I'm working with them. There's been a little bit of phone tag going on, but I hope that by the next meeting we have the framework of the agreement worked out such that it could be signed.
Thank you.
It just wasn't able to happen in time for this particular meeting. But that does tie into the presentation that will be coming later, which is, what is the best way to set one of these up from scratch. So, it's all related, but hopefully by next meeting, we'll have, a lot more to discuss on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I guess we'll table that until the next meeting. Second is a covenant bond release request we have for lots 7 and 8 for the Riley Jane subdivision with Calvin Moore. Is the requester? I guess I see CJ here.
Yeah. Hi guys, how you doing? I'm
CJ.
here for Calvin. So yeah, basically it's lots 7 and 8. We're looking for a release, and I believe there's a letter sent to the board from Mark.
Yep, Mr. Wetzel sent us a letter. Mark, you want to take care of this, please?
Yes, the letter from Mr. Wetzel to the planning board dated February 1st reads, "Dear board members, the planning board currently holds covenants on 3 lots 7, 8, and 9 in the Riley Jane subdivision, and a cash escrow as surety for the site development. CJ Moore, the developer, has requested a release of the covenants for additional lots based on the value of the remaining work. Based on the site work status as of February 1st, 2021, the value of the remaining work is as follows. First bullet, site work on the contract, $58,277. Trees and site restoration, $5,000. 5% contingency, $3,165, for a total of $66,442. And then he goes on, currently the town has an escrow with the developer of approximately $42,000. I am recommending that the planning board vote to release the covenants on lots 7 and 8. I will notify the planning board when the value of the work remaining is under the escrow amount and recommend releasing the covenant on the final lot at that time. If you have any questions or require any additional information, please feel free to contact me. Regards, Mark Wetzel, Superintendent of Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mark. Any discussion on this from board members? We need to, yeah, I mean, I looked it through all. Mark, thank you very much for reading it. My copy is somewhere. Anyway, it was a long day at my desk going from thing to thing. What do we need to do, Mark? Make a motion?
Yes, the
Okay,
board should make a motion to release the covenants for lots 7 and 8 in the Riley Jane subdivision per the letter dated February 1st, 2021 from Superintendent Wetzel to the planning board.
Mr. Krantz on my right, how do you say? You want to do it for us?
Sure. I make a motion that we release the two lots 7 and 8 on the Riley James subdivision as articulated in the February 1st, 2021 letter to the Air Planning Board from the Public Works Superintendent Mark Wetzel.
Thank you very much. Then a second, Ms. Marie, thank you very much. Any further discussion?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
just-
go ahead, Mr. Diskin.
So while I have CJ on the phone or on the line, excuse me, would you be open to having given us an inspection or a walk around the site as you get closer to that last lot so we can all take a look and be aware of what's going on as you get to the last one?
Yeah, absolutely. What I had mentioned to Mark Wenzel also that possibly releasing all three, but it's just a timing issue. We didn't to put up cash to cover everything for the security. So absolutely, if you guys want to walk around, by all means, get a hold of me and I'll show you what you want to see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, CJ. We just want to get, we're doing our best to button things up so we don't have things lasting a long time into the future. It becomes a nuisance for everybody. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, any further discussion from the board? Hearing none. Ms. Murray, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Krantz?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Diskin?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you very much for putting that together as quickly as you did, Mark Archambault and Mark Wetzel. Next on our, excuse me. Well, I see Mr. Feeden on the screen there. Next on our agenda is a presentation on performance guarantees. And I'm sorry, Wayne, is your last name pronounced Feeden?
Fiden, but I answered anything.
My mother gave me a first name that everyone spells wrong, so it's okay. I'm sorry, Mark. I'm sorry, Wayne. Thank you very much. And Wayne is the.
Don't just blame your mother.
I'm sorry, but I've been spelling my name for 62 years.
Now he's changed.
Almost.
Make it right.
Yeah, it's never going to be a J, guys, and it's never going to have two Fs. So there we go. So Wayne is the planning director for the city of Northampton. And for those of you at home, like every good athlete, you go through training every now and again to buff up on your skills. And what Wayne's going to do with us, hopefully this evening, is talk about performance guarantees, the different kinds of performance guarantees and why they are used. Is that a pretty straightforward introduction, Wayne?
That sounds great. Thank you.
And
So thank you all for having me. I'm going to put up press slideshow. So depending on the size of your screen, you may want to shrink the pictures. But so just very quick background about me. I teach part-time at UMass since I do a lot of research in addition to my work in Northampton. So I think I may have written the only book on performance guarantees because it's really boring stuff. I teach this to my students, and I will say of all the classes I teach, it's the one they're most likely to fall asleep on. So it's really important not to have failed projects, but I think this stuff is very important, but I totally understand it's not the most exciting. So
excuse me, Wayne, I'm sorry. As the chair, I get to step in every now and again. Do you want us to stop you to ask questions? Or would you rather go through the presentation and get questions at the end? That's my first question.
Yep. I'm totally flexible. The questions you sent me ahead of time, I've addressed in here. So some of the questions I might have answered later, but whatever works for your flow, I'm fine with.
I appreciate that. No, I want to try and keep us within a certain time frame. We shoot for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes for these meetings. And if we can do that, that'd be great. And the second question is, where is your class taught at UMass? What building, what room?
It's designed, well, right now it's remote.
Okay.
It's the design building, the Conti design building.
I never had a class in that one. It's new. But anyway, go ahead. Thank you.
That new.
So I think obviously I just heard you talk about covenants and escrows and bonds, so you clearly have experience in all this area. The reason I first got interested in this issue is I was in grad school during a lot of the, not the last recession, 3 recessions ago, when a lot of savings and loan banks went bankrupt, and a lot of both bonds and letters of credit were worthless because banks weren't there and a lot of developers went bankrupt. And so a lot of municipalities were really scared about what does this mean and how do we follow through on this. King County in Seattle was finding lots of performance guarantees that weren't worth anything. So it became an interest in me. And it happens to be good timing for us. It's not, Northampton's a small city. It's not growing wildly. So it's not that I have personally a huge number of experience on subdivision failures, but I've been in Northampton 32 years. I've probably overseen 8 failed projects in that time. So even though it's not a huge number, I've sort of seen a different variety of failings. And this picture you're looking at right now happens to be a failed project we're looking at today. So failed last summer and we're going through this process. So I'm using this as a quick study. So what you see is the developer walked away from this project the way it's built now. 14 homes completed and sold, 3 homes partially built, 2 empty lots, the primer coat down, a low spot in the road, the drainage isn't done, medium to high-end homes. And so obviously people very unhappy about the process. And so we got involved. So we called the tri-party agreement. I'll come back later and define each of these agreements. But we basically said, we think you've defaulted on this process. I'm going to reiterate this later when I talk about what's really important, but I just want to read the first sentence of the second paragraph. We have incurred liability by reason of the failure of the developer to complete the construction, blah, blah, blah. That's important because the language in whether it's a letter of credit or an escrow or a tri-party agreement or bond, if you just take the agreements that banks will often offer to you, you may have to go to court to actually collect. You may have to prove to them that you failed. And so what we say is we will only take a performance guarantee if the bank acknowledges or the surety acknowledges that they have to write us a check the second we send them that language. So they owe us money the second we notify them that we've incurred liability. Now, if we're lying, they can sue us. It's not that we are protected from suing, but it changes the dynamic a little bit. If you have to go to court to collect, it slows you down a long time. And going back to this picture, nobody wants to wait a long time for this stuff to happen. So that's a key thing. And later on, when I summarize this, I'm going to go through the list of what to me are key roles, but it's changing the balance of power a little bit in the process. So in this case, one of the questions you all asked me was, does it make sense to double protect things with both a covenant and some sort of a performance guarantee? And I heard you tonight say that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, you were releasing 2 covenants tonight because you already held a cash escrow. So that's exactly what we do. When, as you all probably know, when you do a subdivision, you're required to have a covenant on the entire project. That is, a developer can sell their entire subdivision, but they can't sell an individual lot until they replace it with a financial performance guarantee.
Oh.
The problem with financial performance guarantees is, first, things always go wrong. No matter what your guarantee method is, things go wrong. And second, a financial performance guarantee doesn't give you certain rights. It doesn't necessarily give you the rights to go onto private property. In this case, we had a detention pond on private property and a developer who wasn't responding to our calls. So our typical pattern in Northampton is you start with a covenant not to sell an entire subdivision. When we get a performance guarantee, then we release the covenants on all but 2 lots. we're totally flexible about 2 lots. You know, developers never know what the demand will be. So they might give us 2 lots for lots 1 and 2, and then a buyer wants to buy lot 1, and we say, fine, take lot 1, give us lot 5. We don't care. We take swaps. We want to make sure that that new lot we're getting isn't more heavily mortgaged, because obviously the covenant's worthless if there's no value. So in this case, we had a tri-party agreement, in essence, a letter of credit, and I'll come back to defining this later, with $208,000 left. It began at a much bigger number. As the developer built the project, the number came down. Unfortunately, we didn't think $208,000 was enough to finish a project. If you've been involved with developments that fail, you sometimes know that as they fail, costs actually rise. So typically you have a bunch of money, and as the developer does work, you release money. So you always have enough to finish the project. But I'm going to go back to this picture again. Sometimes the developer messes up. To the right, you can't really see this, but there's an underground drainage basin. That's a $50,000 item. And if the developer lets silt go in, that gets clogged, and suddenly something was built and we release money, now has to get rebuilt again. So occasionally you have this problem of you're funding something twice. So the bank then came to us and said, hey, we want to be made whole. Will you release the covenants? And we said, yes, you have to give us more money. And the bank agreed to give us another $115,000, and then we released the covenant. So I'm going to get away from law for a second. This is a dance. This is philosophy. But I've been involved with workouts, which take 3 years to come to fruition. Everybody's in court. In the meantime, everything's falling apart. We think that doesn't work well. So I'm a big believer in not letting projects halt. So it's possible we could have gotten $130,000 from the bank. And maybe at the end of the day, when we finish the project, we'll wish we got that extra $15,000, because we don't know exactly what the cost to finish the project is. But it's possible if we would have held out, the bank would say, there's no value to us, because the property is so heavily mortgaged by contractors and other people, the bank would walk away. So there is a dance, and I have to say this is the hardest thing that I do. It's like any negotiation. You don't really know what the right number is, but you want to get to yes. You want to get to people. So that's the specifics. I won't bore you with the numbers, but we're always doing our pro formas and our projections. So we have, in essence, $285,000 for the projects. We're underway now. We've spent some of the money. That's the middle column. We have contracted for more, and we're currently going to bid for another $200,000 a cost. So we're doing some estimates. Our bid price includes a 20% contingency, because you never know what prices are. And so the way this formula goes, the fourth line up is 25,000 over and above. So we built 20% in, and then we have a $25,000 safety. So we think we're in good shape, and that's why we were willing to accept the bank's money. But we could be wrong. I mean, this is, I was listening to your earlier, and the problem with estimates is, if any of you do contracting, the price for doing something 1 year could be totally different than the price the next year. Asphalt prices go up, labor's things. So the absolute best engineer in the world, being totally honest, and most of them frankly are honest, are just not good. I mean, I hire a lot of engineers as part of my work, and I love a lot of firms I work with, and I always find cost estimating the hardest thing to do, because prices are really variable. And I go to bid and I open bids, and the difference between the lowest bid and the highest bid is sometimes 100%. So it's not an exact science. So that's all the background is saying why this is not an easy thing to do. So that's sort of the background. The rest I'm going to give you is more generic. I just need to say, this is my disclaimer. I'm not an attorney. And even if I was, I've talked to enough city solicitors and town councils that there are a couple areas, I'm going to try to highlight them, where different solicitors and town councils disagree, and where some of the law isn't settled. So even, whoever your town council is, you may hear different things if you change councils. So to set the stage, and again, interrupt me, Jeff, or anybody else, if I'm going too fast or too slow, but so all performance guarantee is to ensure performance on the project. You're required by state statute to do that for subdivisions. You don't have the authority, I wouldn't think, as a reasonable condition to do it for other things, but you could, if town meeting would agree, you could put in your zoning for special permits, for site plan approvals. Your conservation commission could do it for wetlands permits. Again, you need authority for that. So subdivision, what everybody does because we're required to do, but many communities do it for other things. So non-financial performance guarantees are just that. So what you released today was the covenant on 2 lots. Those are non-financial performance guarantees. Again, it's fungible. In Northampton's case, the bank gave us $115,000 and then we released it. So it has a little performance measure. Certificate of occupancy, obviously the question is your goal to make sure the project gets done correctly and the town doesn't get damaged, or is your goal to protect buyers? And probably it's both. I mean, usually the statute's actually written about protecting the town's interests. We all want to protect buyers' interests, but that's not our legal obligation. But so, you know, thinking about a certificate of occupancy, at what point? So I would say, quite frankly, the neighborhood does not see my office as a hero because we did give certificate of occupancies for some of the homes. And the neighborhood said, well, the city messed up. You shouldn't have given that COs. I don't think we had the legal right not to give them, but you know, I understand that position. But you know, so you at least want to be upfront about what is your goal. So these are all the mechanisms. Covenant not to sell, you know about because you worked on that. CO obviously comes after a project's done, or you know, building permits, the building permit itself, and then irrevocable offer of dedication. This is sometimes real and sometimes it's implied, but let's say, for example, I don't know what Ayer does, but let's say you don't accept roads, right? That's a political decision. Do you accept a road or you keep them in private hands? If you don't have the land and you take over the property, do you have the right to make improvements to the property? And if you want the road to be built and you want to take it over, are you going to get it? So it's important. In our failed project, for example, there's some common land that is not a city interest. We don't care who owns that land, but there's common land that the developer still owns and the 18 homeowners want to own. And so, you know, it's this weird thing. The city is not going to enforce that. That's between them. But so sometimes you want a developer to make that dedication up front for doing it. So then financial performance guarantees. The one that's most common, so you're going to see this in a later slide, but in Massachusetts, and probably only in Massachusetts and New Jersey, the developer gets to decide the financial performance guarantee, not the town. So we're in a weaker position. Tri-party agreement, 3-party agreements are the most common form of performance guarantees in Massachusetts. They're relatively rare in the rest of the country. Irrevocable letters, standby letters of credit are most common in the rest of the country and relatively rare in Massachusetts. You'll see this in another slide, but some town councils don't think communities have the right to accept letters of credit. And some town councils think they do. The key language, again, this is another slide, is towns can take negotiable securities. So the word letters of credit never shows up in the subdivision control law, but negotiable securities do. And so it's their definition of what that means. So the only difference is in a tri-party agreement, the bank agrees to fund the project. As the developer agrees and completes a step, the town says, yes, you paved the road correctly. That's worth $40,000. Bank, go give that money to the developer, and the town reduces it. In a letter of credit, in essence, you're working down, right? $1 million project, you work down. In a letter of credit, you always work up. How much work's left in the project? I don't care if you spent $40 billion on a $10 project. If there's a lot of money left, we're not going to release it. So it's a slightly stronger tool, but pretty similar. Cash escrow, you know, again, I heard in your conversation, you have it. Cash escrows are great for small projects. The one you talked about was a relatively small cash escrow. Most developers are not so capitalized to have a cash escrow because it means you have to pay for everything twice, right? You're giving all the money to the town to finish the subdivision and you're paying your contractor to finish the subdivision. And while we want to hold developers accountable, we don't want to make them bankrupt. And only a few, well, I mean, again, not $30,000, but if you're paying for $1 million subdivision, you can't come up with $2 million. No one's going to lend it to you. Surety bonds, or we think of as bonds, this is your public works is used to this because every single public project over $50,000 gets a performance bond. It's in essence, a surety company is not the same as an insurance company, but effectively it feels the same. So it's a guarantee. You know, letters of credit and tri-party agreements come from banks. Surety bonds come from surety companies, but it's a similar thing. Liens on a property and property escrows are pretty rarely used, but you sort of think in some ways a covenant is a lien on a property. A property escrow is frankly, somebody gives you some totally different property. You know, I have a Picasso, I don't really, but I have a Picasso, it's worth $1 million. I'm willing to let you have my Picasso, and that's my guarantee. Perfectly legal to take, but only if you really are comfortable valuing my Picasso and know exactly what it's worth. So it's pretty rare, comes up occasionally for process. And then yes, the question someone emailed me up front is absolutely you can combine guarantees. So this is sort of a summary of what I just said. So I'm not gonna go through all these, but it's who they come. Typically the problem with bonds, when we've asked people what's wrong with bonds, is you're more likely to have to go to court to collect your bond. Again, unless you get the bond company to say, we agree to pay you, you know, all you have to do is prove to us. So pretty straightforward. Cash escrow though, if any of you many years ago remember when Bernie Madoff went bankrupt and went to jail, a lot of nonprofit financial institutions in Philadelphia were caught holding the bag. And one of the things that came up was if you hold cash, is it necessarily municipality's cash? Does somebody else potentially have a claim on that cash? That's a question for your town council. You just want to make sure, you know, who controls that money, and is it really your money to control, or could some creditor come after that cash in the bank? So, and again, I just want to go through the highlight ones. So this, yeah. Is there a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick question of Wayne before I get a little bit lost here. Do tri-party agreements typically contain like a mixture of these other sureties, or like, you know, do they include a bond, or is it something totally different?
No, it's basically a letter of credit. Basically, the bank says, so the bank says, we're putting $1 million aside for this project. It's backed by the full faith and credit of the bank. So you don't have to worry about understanding your developer's finances. You trust X bank, First National Bank of Ayer, you trust.
Right.
And they guarantee that money. So far, it's the same as a letter of credit. But that's the money the developer, in essence, borrowed for the bank to pay their contractors. So every time the developer wants to pay a bill, they have to contact you or your DPW director, however you set this up, and say, we put this cash base in, and do you agree we can release $10,000? And then you say, yes, you can go off and you can pay your contractor. We're going to have $10,000 less left, but then there's less money to guarantee.
Right.
So it's an obligation from the bank.
So I was under the impression you can do that sort of thing with a bond, but it sounds more difficult to release funds with a bond, at least.
Yeah, most bonds, I mean, you still reduce bonds. I mean, everything you reduce over time, because developers are paying 1% or 2% of the capital to buy the bond. So you still reduce them. It just tends to be a more cumbersome process, so you don't do it as often.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely, exactly the same process.
Well, thank you. And sorry for the interruption.
I want to ask Wayne a question too on that same, following up on what Mark said. You mentioned that the tri-party agreement, as they go to borrow the funds from the bank, typically could go to a DPW. Does it ever go to a planning board?
Yeah, absolutely.
Schedule of value. In other words, they start with the schedule, just like working a contract on a building, for instance, only instead of going to an architect, it goes to another authority having jurisdiction.
So the legal process is for subdivision, the planning board is in charge. You can have your agents, DPW, Mark, whoever, I don't even know how you're set up in Ayer. You can have your agents actually doing the in the line work, but it's the planning board decision in the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for example, that earlier letter that I raced through, the letter of credit we called, the tri-party agreement we called, the planning board authorized planning staff. sometimes, frankly, we get authority from the planning board to call financial performance guarantees far more often than we use it. It lets us bluff. You know, when a developer goes bankrupt, it's easy. But sometimes you have a developer who's just a jerk, who says, I don't want to finish this project. And so I might go to the planning board and say, this guy's not finishing the work. Do you give me authority to call the letter of credit? And the planning board says yes. And then we call Mr. Contractor and say, you have 60 days to do this work. And if you don't, we're going to call the letter of credit. And frankly, we notify the bank. We had one not that long ago, well, 10 years ago, but where developer wasn't doing a good job. The planning board gave us authority to call a letter of credit. We called the bank, in this case, East Hampton Savings Bank, who we adore. And East Hampton Savings Bank, who the developer was more scared of than us, said, your credit is never going to be good with us if you don't finish this project. We don't want to have this project fail. And the developer did the work immediately the next day. So going back to your question, Ken, yes, always the planning board's involved, because the issues of public meetings, because you're all powerful collectively and individually not powerful, you may or may not want to assign the detailed work to someone, but that's up to you all.
I'm laughing because the way you put it out. And one of the observations I was going to make was we have a very active and very involved Department of Public Works, and Mark Wetzel has been very good at it over the years. Mr. Diskin himself has also done large projects, not housing so much, but large commercial projects. So we have a little bit of experience here on the bench too. But it's almost an automatic thing in Ayer, the way it's been running, and it's really good that we understand this now, or get refresh ourselves with it, because Mr. Wetzel will be moving along mid-year this year. He's got a great staff. We're hoping the staff stays, but this is going to be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And again, you know, I mean, I think I know what I'm doing. I've published on this. I've done a lot of work in this, and yet I still have a neighbor who's worried that they're going to be left holding the bag. So it's not an easy, you know, bankruptcies are hard. And of course, occasionally you get a developer who goes bankrupt because they gambled too much at Foxwoods. But more often they go bankrupt because and I don't know Ayer prices, so don't worry at the numbers, but they thought the lots would sell for $80,000. They got an appraisal that sell for $80,000. The recession comes and they're selling for $50,000. And it's true for everybody else. And you're just, you know, it's like the entire market changes. I mean, we haven't seen that in this current recession, or what was the recession earlier this summer, but we certainly saw that 11 years ago, and we certainly saw that 21 years ago. Or, yeah, those two big recessions, the whole basic economy's changed. And then, of course, you all know this, but there's also a long recovery period, because even when the economy is back to normal, the banks are still scared, and the banks are often more cautious in loaning. So the two things I just want to highlight in this process, what I put in bold, and this is respond to some of the questions, just know for tri-party agreements, letters of credit, and often bonds, but not always bonds, there is an expiration date. And you could be holding a bond that's worth $1 million today and worth zero tomorrow. You know, if you're a planner, you should tenure your resignation when you lose $1 million that nobody noticed. So you just need to figure out what a tracking system is in the process. What we do,
Mark, did you get that?
what we do, so before the recession, before 1989, the big recession when savings and loans failed, we used to get multi-year letters of credit. And then the banks said, we don't do this. We won't do these really long-term things because it's too many unknowns. So banks started giving 1 year. Now some of them go back to 2-year letters of credit. So what we have and typically projects go along just dandy, right? Most, you know, I mean, I had dealt with 8 failures. I've dealt with, you know, hundreds of successful projects. Most projects go forward. And they're going along just fine. And so we never think about calling letters of credit or calling financial guarantees. But you could be getting close to the expiration date. So in our rules, the language we have, besides only having to say the project failed, is we have a right to call a financial performance guarantee strictly by virtue of expiring within 60 days. So routinely, if somebody doesn't renew the guarantee, you know, and whether you have a permit tracking system or you put it in your calendars, you know, we all have different tracks. 61 days before it's going to expire, we're going to write a letter to the bank and the developer saying, we will be calling this in very shortly, and we get the authority from the planning board, unless you renew it. And we're very nice. We write nice letters. We're not trying to threaten them. It just reminds them to renew them, and usually they do unless there's trouble. And then the other warning for all these things, but particularly the tri-party agreement, again, is sometimes costs go up. So I started with Hampton 32 years ago, and the first day I thought I was going to quit because our DPW director gave me a tour of a subdivision where he was like having a bulldozer in wetlands building a detention pond. And it meant that every day he was doing the work, the cost to finish the project were going up dramatically because he had to fix all that stuff out there. So you said be careful that everyone works really hard. I'm sure you have a great system. I mean, the typical system is the engineer for the developer gives an estimate, your DPW director does a review. Some places, if you don't have a DPW director who does that, hires out. You add a margin of safety, which I'll come to in a little while, for things that go wrong. You mentioned a 5% contingency. I usually use a bigger one, but whatever your contingency is. But again, the things go south, so just being ready for those things. All right, so a couple things. There's been surprisingly little litigation, which I think some of it's in Massachusetts. And my data, so I wrote the last of those publications 5 years ago. So I haven't tracked forward cases since then. So some of these cases are very old, 2000, but at least as of 5 years ago, this was still the most recent one I could find. I can't tell you in the last 5 years, but it happens to be a Florida case, but it's a good example. You can guess, like in my community, neighborhoods who think they're covered by a performance guarantee think the cities or towns messed up if they didn't do a project. And so the question is, if we hold an agreement, do the neighborhoods the people who live in these partially completed projects have any enforcement rights? And the courts so far have been consistent, saying no. So this case in Florida was about a letter of credit. And the neighbors said, we're going to sue. And the court said, no, you don't have a right. Doesn't mean that won't change someday in the future, but so that's a good thing. That makes communities a lot more comfortable.
So, and you're talking about single family ownership here, not a homeowners association or a condominium.
Arguably, it would apply to all those things.
But if a developer has reached, say a developer will turn over at 75% build out on a condominium.
Yep.
So developer gets to 80% build out, something happens, it goes south, he walks away. The neighbors do not have standing, but if the condominium association exists, would they have standing?
So you're primarily calling against the financial. So yes, if the developer turned over all his rights to them, but the developer himself, him or herself, still has very limited rights. Because the whole point of these agreements is the surety of the bank is making an independent agreement with the city or town. And so the developer's limited rights. But yes, whatever rights the developer has, they can turn over to the neighborhood association.
Well, I typically even at 75% build out, they don't give up the seat.
Right.
They not until the bonds have been returned do they give up the seat. But it's an interesting thing. You said something very interesting, and we see that a lot out here. I come from closer to Boston, and as soon as a subdivision or OSRD goes forward, we're the bad guys, not the developer.
Yep.
And that's a very, very difficult discussion to have. And I don't want to take the time now, but thank you very much.
Yeah. And I'll say, I'm proud of what Northampton does, but one of the decisions that we made as a city in 1989, whenever that big recession was, is our DPW got staff that was cut. And before that time, DPW inspected every single subdivision under construction. In 1989, we privatized inspections. So the developer hires an independent engineer who we trust. We have to approve the engineer, and the engineer does inspections.
And that's now part of the developers coming to Northampton know that it's part of the deal.
Yep.
Yeah, because we sometimes run across our DPW say, I don't understand. The engineer who did this project we've worked with before, we trust them. And you still have to watch that to a certain extent. Okay, thanks.
Because one reason you have to watch it is, developers going bankrupt and stops paying their engineer, or even worse, doesn't not saving the engineer, but says, well, you don't need to be out there once a day, just go out there every other day. And, for this failed subdivision we're dealing with, one of the things we dealt with is we had to put a new catch basin in to deal with the drainage. And we put a hole in the street, and lo and behold, there's a sewer line in a different place than it was supposed to be designed, and we were told it was designed. And so in the middle of fixing this project, we have to halt because there weren't enough inspections during the process. So we either need to change that, or we try, not very successfully, to send the message out to homeowners buying homes and subdivisions is, it's not our job to protect you. But yes, people will still beat up on us. There's no question about that.
It's an overwhelming experience for a homeowner, so it's hard to do. But thank you. Just keep going. Thank you.
So same thing, this was a Massachusetts case. So again, 1998, not recent, but it's the most recent one again I could find as of 5 years ago, where in this case, a town or city, I'm not sure what Marlborough is, but a town or city called a letter of credit. And the neighbors said, oh, that's great. You called the letter of credit. We think as soon as you call the letter of credit, you step into the developer's position and are responsible for 100% of finishing the project. And Marlborough said exactly what Northampton said and most communities say, which is, we will protect you and spend every penny that we get from a performance guarantee and nothing beyond that. And so we'll go as far as the money goes. The project that I mentioned, in our bidding process, our add alternates are the trees. We know we have enough money to finish everything but the trees. We hope we can finish the trees, but if we don't, we're not going to plant the trees, and the homeowners will still have an obligation for doing it. So this case gave a lot of communities comfort because they were really petrified that as soon as they signed up. And we, again, every town's different. We absorb staff time. In our case, we absorb our city solicitor's time. So we do take on some costs for a project, but we don't spend a penny on hiring out. So that was a great case from my standpoint. Again, I'm not going to go through this, but there's a theme that shows up. This is also Massachusetts about bonds, surety bonds. Still in 1961, right? This goes back a long time. This is before we were a home rule state. But the same thing, the court said towns don't have an obligation. The town collects the money, the city has to do it. What the court said in dicta, I don't know if any of you follow this, but dicta is the court says, hey, we're not ruling on this today. The court said that the homeowners have no rights to the bond. It doesn't mean that they couldn't sue the town itself for screwing up. That wasn't the case before them, and they didn't rule. And again, as far as I could, as a non-lawyer, I couldn't find any case more recently. So the court sort of shot a warning that you have to have reasonable care. And then again, there's another case. This is also old. This is also pre-home rule state. But Agawam, probably another planner who had to quit their job. Agawam didn't watch the time clocks on a subdivision, and so the subdivision approval was issued constructively. So the developer said, "Hey, you issued a subdivision permit and didn't require a performance guarantee." And the court said, the requirement for performance guarantee is in the statute. It doesn't matter if a permit's issued constructively, you still have to do it. So even though the town could impose other conditions, they still got their performance guarantee. So again, a nice comfort level. You can mess up in one area and still be protecting another. Also the question, this had not happened in the two more recent recessions, but in that recession, two big recessions ago, a lot of banks went under. Still a tiny percent. You see that the column on the right, most banks didn't go under, but a lot did. In Northampton Institute for Savings doesn't exist. I don't know, in Ayer, but there are particularly savings and loan institutions. There's a lot less now than there used to be. And so what many towns do is they say, we certainly don't want to understand the developer's finances. We're not going to look at their rating. We don't even want to understand the bank's finances, but there are independent rating agencies. So just as Ayer has a credit rating, Moody's or, rating is equivalent for banks. I know Veribank, and there may be 20 other companies as well, I don't know, who rate banks. And so you can look them up. And so, I don't think Citibank's going bankrupt. I don't think, the banks most of us know, but if I get a letter of credit from First Bank of Duluth that I've never heard of before, I want to look it up and make sure that they're not about to go bankrupt. So it's good to do that, just an extra piece. We require banks allowed, you probably do this for all your contracts anyway, but we require that all litigation can take place in Massachusetts. I don't want to have to file a lawsuit in Minneapolis, and with a credit rating as well for the process. All right, I know I'm running over, so I'll go through this quickly. Am I okay, time-wise?
Yeah, but I mean, I'll check with the people. I think you've got 4 or 5 genuinely interested people here, Wayne. So go with it.
So again, in Massachusetts, if it's a subdivision, the developer gets to choose on the type of performance guarantee, which from my standpoint is unfortunate. Although I know that some towns would only like cash escrows, and I also think, I'm in favor, my own philosophy is I'm in favor of protecting towns, but I'm trying not to be anti-development. And so if you only required cash escrow, you'd be protecting the town, but you'd be making development a lot more expensive, which has its own consequences. So for subdivision, again, developer gets to choose. I already mentioned the language about what's negotiable security. Again, most city solicitors in Massachusetts and town council, I think, do letters of credit, but I was on a panel once with, I'm sorry, who's the firm who represents like a third of the municipalities in the state?
KMP?
Yeah, I was on a panel once with
KP Law, yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't take letters.
Excuse me. Kopelman and Page. I knew my father was an attorney way back when, and our old town moderator was one of the partners at KMP.
So if you required letters of credit or other performance guarantee under zoning, then you could decide what you want. If you subdivision, you don't get that control for doing it. Same thing in New Jersey where there's a case, but I use this only because this has been an issue that's been identified before. Don't spend a lot of time on this because the statute never passed. But the earlier zoning reform bill, the thing that's this year passed in a much more limited fashion, was going to empower towns for doing this. I say it only in that this is an issue that, when Mark and I hang out with other planners, it's planners always raise and complain that we don't get to decide these guarantee forms. So it's a problem we don't get to decide them. All right, so this is sort of, I have a couple slides on summary. And I've gone through a lot of these things, but I just want to go over them because these are, I think, the important take-home points. And I can email Mark the PowerPoint that I'm doing if it's useful. So first is, again, in your subdivision regulations, even though you have to accept the kind of performance guarantee, you can set up the form of it. So you can say, yeah, I'm going to take a letter of credit or tripartite agreement or bond, but it has to be from a Massachusetts bank that has a good credit rating that we can call when we find a deficiency. And so, but it's sort of too late once the development comes forward. I mean, not too late, but you've lost some of the power at the table. I'm a tough regulator, but I believe in disclosing things to the regulated community. So if you put it in your subdivision regulations, then everybody knows up front and the negotiation's easier. So that's the first thing. Just make sure, this one I know sounds really dumb, but I've seen it. Just make sure the documents are completely signed. Sometimes they don't get signed, it's sloppy. In this age of electronic signatures, this is a question for town council. Can you get a bond that's done in DocuSign? I don't know. But, so just be careful, but it is surprising to me the number of sort of mistakes people make. The cost estimates, I've gone over a little bit, but I just want to go over a couple of points. Do think about contingency. I mean, I typically do 20% contingency before I go to bid, because I don't know what the bids will be. And then during construction, I might reduce it down to 5 or 10%, because you might find an unknown condition. But early on, I don't know. And then, of course, if the project failed, is Ken or Mark or your DPW director going to run the project, or are you going to hire a project manager? So you may have costs that wouldn't exist. Are you going to have a lawyer you're going to hire for the process? Inflation, all that sort of thing. So all those things should be covered. There are some costs the developer wouldn't have. There's a gray area, although I've heard it's not so gray anymore. There was a big interpretation for a long time. Public dollars, as I think you all know, every penny of things spent with public dollars need to be spent using prevailing wages. and in essence, union wage. Not exactly the same thing, but in essence, that's what they are. And every dollar spent on public property. So for many years, there was an interpretation that many procurement officers had of saying a failed subdivision, you had to pay prevailing wages. There's been a more recent ruling that says, hey, if this is private land, the developer owns it, and it's not really town money, right? It's bank. So if the town puts money in, $1 in, you're paying prevailing wages. But if you grab the money from the bank, it's still in essence, even though it's in the bank, it's private money. So the newest interpretation is prevailing wages don't apply, but just be careful before you go, make sure that your town council agrees with that. The certificate of default I've already mentioned is I think it's really important to make sure it only takes the certification for the majority of the planning board to call letter of credit or whatever the performance guarantee is. It doesn't take you approving it in court. Expiration dates I've talked about, solvent banks I've talked about. Typically it's a minimum. When I heard the conversation today, either it's a very small project, you're close to the end, I'm not sure which, but the smaller a project is, it's hard to get the big contractors in, so the prices vary more, right? 100 feet of granite curb cost a lot more if you're doing 10 feet of it than if you're doing 1,000 feet of it. So many communities just say, and there's also just labor involved. In our case, in Northampton's case, we don't accept anything less than $50,000. So we keep reducing letter of credit down to $50,000. It's not worth it to us. Like, just finish the project. Don't battle us over two. Again, not lobbying what you do, but just sort of think about what's the right minimum for you. Covenants mixing with other guarantees I've talked about, the irrevocable dedications, and particularly permissions to enter. Having all the money in the world and not having the right to go on the property. Again, this is a town council, city solicitor issue. Many town councils and city solicitors think in applying for the subdivision, they've given, and giving you the performance guarantee, they've given an implied access, and therefore you can go on the property. But my guess is some don't say that. So just make sure that's what we do. We don't feel like we need a written permission, that we think it's implied, but I'm sure that some won't go that way. So just be careful with that. And then I'm just going to run through these numbers very quickly, just give you a sense of what's it. So I did a survey 20 years ago. And so again, I know 20 years is a long time, but it gives you a sense of what people are doing. 92% of subdivisions nationwide at the time were requiring performance guarantees, but only half of zoning. All that's still far. Wetlands, erosion control, which Massachusetts doesn't do so much because we have wetlands. And then the guarantees, letters of credit were by far a plurality. Letters of credit were the biggest ones. I did 2 surveys, one 30 years ago and one 20 years ago. And at the time, letters of credit were going up dramatically and bonds were going down dramatically. Again, I haven't come back to this space, but the sense I get anecdotally is this is probably still true. Tri-party agreements, again, not used really anywhere outside of Massachusetts. So that 2% is probably all Massachusetts cases. And then the Picasso's 1%, so it comes up occasionally if you're doing it. Again, bonds, I think, get a bad rep. It's funny because municipalities require bonds for every public construction project, so we know how they work. They get a bad rep for subdivisions because towns feel like they have to go to court, to collect. I think that could change if you have good language that says you're going to pay. But I asked people what worked best for you. I heard a lot more complaints about bonds than letters of credit for doing it. I think it was the last slide. So authorized, used for critical ones. The second one, this is a little controversial, although no one really fights it. I don't know if you had any cell towers in town, but there's many towns when they get a cell tower require a bond to take it down if it's obsolete, $100,000 bond. And what almost every cell company will say is, why do you make us do it and not Walmart do it? When Walmarts go bankrupt, individual Walmarts close all over the country. They close more often than we do. Why do you collect bonds from us and not from them? We think we go to court and we'd win. And then they say, but it costs us so little, we don't really care. So there's never been litigation that I've known about. But just sort of think about being consistent.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. We do have cell towers, but we have solar fields. And the decommissioning of a solar field, that costs money.
Yep.
And that's not, and you know, I hope to be here in 25 years when we start decommissioning them, if they get decommissioned. At that point, I'd rather not have the town come find me. I'll be a doddering old man, but I don't want to be there. more doddering than I am now, if I can say that.
Well, that's since you're exactly my age. You're not too doddering.
I have no idea how you know that, but I'm not going to ask.
You began by saying you're 62.
I know, yeah, very yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Wayne. This is it's been rapid fire. It's been very helpful. You did say, can we get this presentation from?
Yep.
Do you mind?
No problem at all.
And would you mind if we sent you some follow-up questions if they come up?
Sure, anytime. Just
Okay.
as long as my line's going to be, if it's too specific about a case, I'm probably going to say, go talk to town council.
No, I'm happy to. I'm happy to, but I have a feeling you covered a lot of material in a very short period of time, and I really do appreciate that. And I think the board appreciates that. But we're also, you know, I think what's going to happen upon thinking about it over the next couple of days, questions will come up.
I got a couple right now.
Ken, if you want to ask now, go for it.
Do you have time, Wayne, or
Yep, absolutely.
Chairman? Okay, I just want to go over a couple of things that you talked along the way. First of all, I want to make sure that my fellow board members understand that I understand that what we're talking about is is a surety to complete the drawings of the subdivision, which does not include the lots. It's only the work of the roadway and the approved drawings for the roads.
Yes.
That's correct.
And the related infrastructure, sewer, water, utilities, et cetera. Because there are, on occasion, there's a misunderstanding that people think that in our process as a planning board that we're responsible for what gets constructed on the lots. And we're not under a subdivision typically in this stage of the game, so.
That's absolutely right. The only gray area, just to be clear, is in Northampton's case, there's some things we won't accept on public property. So a detention pond, for example, might go on common area of the subdivision, and then that would be considered part of the common improvements, even though the city would never own it. So that you could do. Storm scepters, for example, we require in individual lots. So, but it has to be related to the infrastructure. You're absolutely right. It's not about the lot improvements.
That actually brings up a great question. If you don't
Careful,
mind to follow-
careful, Wayne. Careful, Wayne.
So we have been guided in a couple of instances by folks that the storm retention systems are big ones, in fact, can be placed on open space under our OSRD regulation. Our preference would be for that not to be an open space. So are you reinforcing that by saying that that should be not in common area or open space, because we lose control when it goes on to an open space situation?
So there's two parts to the question. The first is totally local preference, and there's no right answer. You know, whether you're willing to have it on open space or not, it's up to you. Like our standard for, we have open space you get credit for as part of a cluster project.
Right.
We allow drainage in open space if it requires no maintenance. So an artificial wetland, for example, we allow. A detention pond we wouldn't allow because it has ongoing maintenance. The second part, which is more related to the subdivision, is as long as there's easements, it's sort of bring into the subdivision.
Yep.
You know, if the town owns the road, the town has an easement, the homeowners, then I think it's legal to pay for as part of the subdivision guarantees, and it's legitimate to require.
Okay.
And Ken, if I may, another way we look at that is we do require in some situations them to post a to fund the maintenance for a period of time on site work that's done in such a way that the town has access to it. But we struggle here with site work maintenance doesn't get done.
Yeah.
Homeowners move on. So 3 years ago, we were going to embrace it all and just charge them and do it as part of the town.
Yeah.
So we're walking that line, trying to figure it out.
That's a perennial problem. I'm a big believer personally in so-called soft solutions, because soft solutions are often less expensive than hard solutions. But the problem is they require maintenance, whether it's pervious pavement or, you know, rain gardens. I totally believe in philosophically, but I just see them go bad. And so you have to figure out how do you keep them from going bad.
It only takes 3 or 4 years. Go ahead, Ken. You have other questions?
Well, there was a couple of more just for clarification. So you mentioned in your list, you had certificates of occupancy on your list. So my question was, when do you believe is the correct time to allow the developer to get a certificate of occupancy. I thought maybe we were making that a little more difficult under our regulations to try to encourage them to be pretty much to bind a course, I believe, before we issued a certificate of occupancy. Do you have a feeling on that?
Yeah, and I will say never in Northampton, I'm sure never in Ayer, but because COs come from building inspectors who are often more independent, I've heard in some towns, they're worried about relying on that protection too much because they're not sure that it's really going to work. So that's one thing. The other thing for us is typically we're happy to withhold a CO when it's clearly tied and documented. So, you know, in an urban project where we want roof gutters to go into an underground cistern and maybe only overflow into the subdivision, then making sure that cistern is in place is a totally legitimate thing before you get a CO. It's hard to pass the more common responsibilities for the subdivision to the individual lot owners. So it's the thing, at least the line that we use, and it isn't necessarily the right answer, is any of the work that's on the private properties, even if they might contribute to the subdivision, that we might withhold the CO for. So in those pictures that I showed you that failed subdivision, a lot of the water from the street is coming because there's silt running off the developer's 2 private lots.
Okay.
So they're not part of the subdivision, but they're leading the subdivision to fail. We would certainly not give a CO for those developers' lots until that developer fixed the property.
Mhm.
So I think it's a strong tool, but you really need to make sure you're building commissioner inspectors on board.
Mhm.
And the other thing was an explanation of what that irrevocable offer of dedication really meant. I think that we saw that term somewhere.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, again, you could be doing different things. So Northampton example, we don't like dead end streets. I mean, people love living in dead end streets, but we take over streets. They're hard to plow. They're more expensive for police and fire. And there's sort of a hierarchy, you know, equity is a really important principle for us. And for every dead, you know, I used to live in a dead end street. I love it. So I'm not criticizing dead end streets, but from the city's standpoint, each dead end street means another street with more traffic. So we try to discourage them. And our requirement is we have a maximum of 500-foot dead end street requirement. But to have any dead end street, you have to have a walking trail off it. The idea is we still want to connect it. And that walking trail has to be available to people to walk on.
Okay.
And, you know, we think we are allowed to require it because it's voluntary. The developer doesn't have to have the dead end street. They're voluntarily doing it. And so we want them to dedicate that early in the process so that if they go bankrupt, we've already owned the property. So whether they transfer to us or whether it's an agreement to transfer that beats all the mortgages, we just want to make sure we're going to get that trail.
Interesting that you should mention that because we have reached a point where that's pretty much where we sit. It's not codified yet, but as we see more and more cul-de-sacs, you know, what's left here is land that you can't connect through because of our wetlands.
Yep.
But we got a lot of land, so we see a lot of cul-de-sacs. But as you said it, we want access through easements and stuff. And so that's starting to happen. I am going to look at the clock, guys, and say if there's you got any other pressing questions from anybody at this point? I don't think so. Wayne, thank you very, very much. It's been whirlwind and very interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I hate to say it, but it's interesting stuff. And safe trip home, Wayne. Okay. Next on our agenda, Mr. Krantz, I'm going to lean on you. Actually, I was going to ask one question, but Wayne's gone. In our OSRD, do we have he talked about, Ken, I'll talk to you about it afterwards. I've forgotten what my question is.
Okay.
But there was something in subdivisions he mentioned, and I want to make sure we have it.
I have the, well, Mark may have them too, but I have the subdivision regs here.
I have them right next to me, but I was actually enthralled. He said something about they require it in subdivisions, and I want to make sure OSRDs, it's also required in OSRD. I'll think of it in a moment.
Okay.
I was jotting notes down everywhere.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Krantz.
Just, you know, the biggest takeaway I got from Mr. Fiden's presentation, and you guys challenged me if I misunderstood this, was the significance of the certification default. that we don't have to go and fight in the courts, that we make it clear from day one, and anything that's posted through a bank they have to accept the certification of default on our authority in order to meet the call. I think that's a critical component. Do you guys agree?
Yeah,
Yes.
I guess I want to thank Mark for getting this gentleman to come to the meeting, number one. But it just points out how many things there are to learn. And every time you bring a professional in, there's got to be at least one or two things that'll click, just like what you said, Jonathan. So that's a big deal, because none of us have been around long enough to do one of these things and see it go through the whole sequence and somebody go belly up. So we want to kind of protect the whole town and whatnot. So
Well,
that was good.
I'm going to speak about that, and it's not wishful thinking. I think we've been fairly successful in doing this. You are correct, Mr. Diskin. We haven't seen anything go belly up, which I'm happy about. No one wants to be in that conversation, but I think we do have. Well, I think we're in pretty good shape with what's going on, and as we do things going forward, we'll also be working with new developers. This project over on Washington Street is a brand new developer to town. So it's nice to have this information for that. Fantastic. I'm going to take us to our next on our agenda, which is continued public hearings for Washington Street. And Mr. Krantz, are you ready?
Yes, I am. I'd like to make a motion to continue the public hearing for the special permit for 14 Washington Street to our next scheduled meeting, the Air Planning Board.
Seconded.
Moved by Mr. Krantz, seconded by Ms. Murray. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Krantz, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Diskin?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Murray?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. Mr. Krantz, are you ready for the next one?
Yes, I make a motion for continued site plan review for 14 Washington Street to our next planned APB meeting.
Seconded.
Moved Mr. Krantz, seconded by Ms. Murray. Thank you very much. Mr. Krantz, how do you, any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Krantz, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Diskin?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Ms. Murray?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you very much. Next on our list is town planner updates. Mark, we even have time for you tonight.
Good.
I hope you got something to say.
Ooh. Enjoy February, because March will be much busier for the planning board. We have a few things lined up. The first is the special permit application for the density bonuses of the Washington Street subdivision that we talked about. The applicant just filed the application with us, and it looks complete. So we'll be, hearing that in March, I believe March 9th. Also, we're going to be receiving a site plan for a renovation to the McDonald's restaurant on the Carlton Rotary. They're not tearing down the building. They're going to be doing renovations to the building, but there is quite a bit of site work, including a whole new circulation pattern, which is designed to help alleviate some of the traffic problems at that location. So we've been in communication with that applicant, at least the applicant's engineer from Bowler Engineering, and they're gearing up for a March site plan meeting for that. Also wanted the board to know that I'm putting together a district local technical assistance grant application to do a build out study of the form-based code districts. Downtown and Park Street, as well as West Main Street. And what a build out study does is you look to see, how much development you could get if everything is built out according to what the zoning allows. So that will help us determine the number of apartments we could expect over the next few decades in the form-based code districts, how many school children it might generate, the parking demands, water and sewer use. So a lot of things that I think we need to get a handle on in order to do planning for the future. So, I'm excited about that. I'll be working with Alan, who put the form-based codes together, to put this grant application in place.
Thank you.
Also, I wanted to ask the board if the board feels that we should do any zoning bylaw amendments for the Springtown meeting. I know back a meeting or two ago, I circulated some ideas about how to tweak the density bonuses for the OSRD. Not sure if people looked at that, but it's my opinion. They could use some tweaking, but whether we want to do that now or wait to see how it works out with this subdivision and perhaps another one, it's up to the board to decide that. So
Let me ask you,
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
go
How
ahead,
much time
Jonathan.
do we have before we have to submit it to post it as a warrant on the, for the town meeting?
how much time do we have? Not a lot. I think we would have to start the hearing at the very latest at the first March meeting.
Yeah, Mark, if I
Make that.
understand correctly, the warrant closes sometime in April.
Right.
Can we get it on the agenda, Jeff?
I'm going to, so since I'm thinking through my thoughts. Typically we bring, don't we do,
Zoning in the fall.
we
Yeah,
do zoning in the fall. What I'm trying to say is we do zoning in the fall.
We
Typically because we have omnibus and stuff we got to get done in the spring. And so I'm a little hesitant to bring it up and try and rush it through to get into April. Mark says we are going to be busy. We are going to be busy. Even the the Washington Street we got that coming up. The McDonald's is kind of an interesting one. I got a little wind of that a few weeks ago. So we're going to be busy. I'd like to try and see. I'd like to think we could do it if we had to, but I also think there's a discussion around density bonuses that has to take place. And I don't want to short shrift that, honestly.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think we need to be unified and be prepared to do so, in the best manner. I tend to think, if you can get one or two minor zoning things done in the spring that you would need to do in the fall, it might be okay. But I do agree that, yes, usually we do zoning in the fall. That gives us a little more time to think about it. But based on my past experience, the summer goes fast.
Yeah.
In order to make the fall town meeting, we need to probably hold the hearings in August.
Yeah, and I think it's perfectly fine to hold the hearings in April or May, quite honestly. I just don't know that we've got the bandwidth to nail it down between now and mid-March.
Yeah,
We should be working on Washington Street, getting the 14 Washington Street, also getting that cleared up, hopefully, in the next 2 or 3 meetings.
Right. So if that comes on board, then we have 3 cases at the same time. Plus, we know that after the special permit for Washington Street, for the subdivision, we'll have the definitive subdivision.
Right.
Exactly.
And Mark, what about that project off of Wright Road? I remember hearing a couple months ago that might come back alive. Is that anywhere?
We notice it's known as Stratton Hill.
Yeah, the Stratton Hill.
Yes. That's still, I think, before the Conservation Commission, but yes, that will eventually be coming our way, I would anticipate, but I have not heard any rumblings from them. But yeah, they could be before us over the next few months.
Good, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
When we think about any zoning changes to the zoning bylaw, Mr. Schultz has made comments in the past and about tweaking as well. So I just recommend that Mark work with Charlie so we come with a comprehensive list that comes before us that may include things that we haven't thought of, but have been brought up by the zoning enforcement officer, Mr. Schultz.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. I've actually had a couple of conversations with Mr. Schultz about that, and he was going to convene a working group with the I forget the nickname for the gentleman from the fire department. He has a nickname.
Fire Bob.
Fire Bob, thank you very much. He and Fire Bob were gonna. I asked Charlie to sit down with Fire Bob as best they could and make a short list for us to work on. And then I was going to ask somebody from the board to nominate themselves to work with them on it quickly. I think there's some fairly easy stuff. Some of it is as simple as, is an overhang over a porch a structure that can't be within a certain distance of a sideline? How do we enforce that? Because it's not actually described. So
Upgrading the
he's,
definitions better.
yeah, he's just looking for some guidance. So when he's standing in the field, he's not arguing with somebody.
Yep.
And he's got a lot of feeding. It's the practical nuts and bolts of enforcing the bylaw. And
Right.
so he and Fire Bob are going to work on that. Mark, if you could you circle back with
Yes.
building or Heather? Just somebody ask them where that stands, because I did request they put together a list for us to work from, and we'd be more than happy to work with them.
Right. Yeah, I'll
So-
meet with Charlie as soon as possible about that
Great.
list so we can.
Yeah, thanks, Ken.
prioritize. Yep.
Thanks, Ken. Anything else in the way of announcements? Because I want to move us on to old business pretty quickly. Old business. Anybody got any old business things to talk about?
Yes.
Please go.
Um, as
I should have said, Mr. Diskin, what do you want to do for old business?
The oldest person gets to have the oldest business. I guess that's the way it goes. Any response from the Board of Selectmen from the town of Harvard?
That's a good question. As a matter of fact,
Select Board, excuse me, not Board of Selectmen.
okay, so I have some feedback, and if you don't mind me paraphrasing the feedback I got today, let me take a look at it quickly. We have not heard back from the town of Harvard. We still do believe that we've gotten that we are correct about where the town line is. And there was a communication sent to the town of Harvard. Today is the 9th, this morning, asking where it stands. Because as you know, what's happened is here in the town, they're kind of unraveling that long, circuitous letter we got from the homeowners over there. And they're trying to figure out what's going to happen. So the wind is blowing in the direction of we're going to find out something soon, but no one's given us anything official yet. How's that for the
Excellent.
answer? Okay. New business, if there's no other old business. Oh, excuse me. I will tell you all one thing. When Mr. Beals was talking to us about Panther Place, we talked about the 24-inch tree survey. And I offered to Mr. Beals to walk the property with him if he wanted me to. He's sent me the invitation, and this Saturday, if the weather holds for Saturday, we're going to do it at some point during the day, based on the weather.
Good.
So yeah, 18 degrees and a wind. We'll be walking the property, but and I'm not there. I'm not really going as much to make sure, I'll give you feedback when we're done with that walkthrough. Under new business, I've got one thing. If anybody else has new business, Mark, I think you went through it with your report.
Yeah, I'm all set.
Hopefully everybody got the email from the town about the upcoming elections. We have 2 seats that can be refilled this year. I would appeal to our board members. We got a great team here. I would hope that you would seriously consider, and I'm more than happy to sign nomination papers for you all. So please think about it. Thank you very much.
So who's up? Is it Ken and Julie that are up?
Yep. Yes, Ken and Julie are up. And then,
We're a team, me and Ken.
yeah, they are. They're a great team.
We bring diversity to the group. Age and beauty.
I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it, except that leaves you out, Ken. I'm sorry, I can't. So, wow. Meeting minutes. Thank you again, Jonathan, for all the work you do on meeting minutes.
Thank you.
It's almost automatic. So how do you want to handle meeting minutes, guys?
Want me to motion to approve?
Please do.
I make a motion to approve the Air Planning Board meeting minutes from January 12th, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Krantz, for making the motion. Do we have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. King. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Krantz, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Diskin,
Aye.
Mr. King,
Aye.
Ms. Murray.
Aye.
Chair votes aye to accept them. Fantastic. How about January 26th,
Yes,
Jonathan?
I move that we approve the Air Planning Board meeting minutes for January 26th, 2021.
Seconded.
Moved by Mr. Krantz, seconded by Ms. Murray. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Diskin,
I looked at them this afternoon and had some issues, but I couldn't get back through to the office because of the storm or whatever. So I'm not prepared to vote yes on those yet.
I am willing to table it if you want. I'd rather get them right. I mean, this is honestly a public record. And so, Ken, would you please share those with us between now as soon as possible? Great, thank you very much. Yeah, a week's not gonna, next meeting's not gonna hurt anything. I want to make sure that we have them correct. That's it for, wow, we actually got it done in under an hour and a half.
Mr.
I
Chair,
think. Yes, Mr. King.
just one comment on performance guarantees, if I may.
Mhm.
One of the other takeaways is that it sounds like subdivisions default because of the property value. And so I think the board, among other institutions here in town, help this town be an attractive town. And that goes a long way to not having to exercise these performance guarantees. So I think that was kind of a message from Wayne's presentation.
Yeah, I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with the Northampton area, but you can drive out. I mean, I know Julie went to school out there. I went to school out there. I go out there a couple times a year. My bike rides are out there. You can ride out of Northampton towards Amherst, and you're basically riding through Weston. Really high, an old farming community that's turning into a very high-end bedroom town for Amherst and Northampton. You can drive the other direction and you're literally going into farmland. That may or may never become valuable. It's really a weird thing out there. I'd say Northampton, we're very similar, quite honestly, I think, in the housing market. So with the towns around it. But yeah, no, anyway, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed his presentation. And
I have something too to add.
yeah, go ahead.
I apologize because I should have brought this up under old business, but now when we're talking about the performance guarantee, I meant to ask Mr. Ashenbo to provide a draft to the board before the next meeting, if and when he completes the performance guarantee, based on what we've seen tonight and learned tonight. I think we should look at a draft before we are prepared to vote on that. Before whatever meeting it comes up at next on the particular, bonding and performance guarantee. Now, we already have a covenant in place on this the project because that was required by our regulations before we signed off on the subdivision. But we're talking about now putting a bond on top of it. So anyway, we are some kind of surety. So
John Carroll Reserve, you're talking.
right. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Everyone
great.
agrees that makes sense, then I'll go along, but I don't want to. Think we should all
No.
look at it.
Oh, yes, yeah, the planning board should authorize whatever the final document is.
Right. And I did want to mention that he, as part of his presentation, he mentioned that the decision in Massachusetts is one of only 2 states that allow the applicant to make the decision as to the type of performance guarantee. And that needed to be changed at a town meeting. But the paragraph in our section regarding that says that the following methods of securing construction or improvements may be utilized by applicants subject to the board's acceptance. The board reserves the right to stipulate the preferred form of security to be provided based upon prevalent practice, current financial market conditions, and the nature and scope of the approved subdivision. So we have some pretty good language in there, which gives us a little more authority under the subdivision regulations, but not part of the zoning, I guess. Just mentioning it.
Yep. And that was actually my question about the OSRD.
That's what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I think it's like, did we think of, so thank you, Ken. You got my question figured out too.
We have some
Okay.
writing in us. These are our new
Okay.
regulations. And bear in mind that the John Carroll Reserve was before that regulation was in place. So this only starts with the newest subdivisions.
The one starting with the one over on Washington Street, we've already started. We just did the preliminary on, and finally I signed the preliminary decision. I left it for you, Heather.
Ah, great.
Okay.
Okay, I happened to get to the town hall after it was closed today, about 2:30 or so. So, anything else anybody has? I want to say thank you all. I think it went really well.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
wait a minute, Jonathan.
Very quickly, Joanne Christoph has been so kind to share with us a special issue of Massachusetts Wildlife's Bulletin, the 30th anniversary one about the Massachusetts Endangered Species Act. And so far, Ken has read it. I've read it. Now it's my turn to pass it on to one of you. And it gives you an excellent overview of what the NHESP, that National Natural Heritage and
Natural
Endangered
heritage, endangered species.
all about. This really gives you an in-depth look. So Jeff, I think you're scheduled next. So I'll probably put in an envelope and I'll text you and let you know somehow that's in your mailbox or on your porch.
Yeah, just slide it in the top of the mailbox. It's a locked box. It's always out
Oh,
there
okay.
on the thing. Okay. I also wanted to say something else. I think you all got an email to this effect, and I want to say thank you. I want to acknowledge the Conservation Commission for the work they've done in putting together
Yes.
the regulations.
Yes.
They've done a great job. They've been, I feel like the whole thing's coming together cohesively.
Mhm.
And I want to appreciate, I got to say, I appreciate all the work you guys did taking that Friday night to meet with them. It was very, very helpful.
Mhm.
And it's nice to know that we're all starting to speak from the same, sing from the same songbook, which is very helpful. If there's nothing else, we'd love a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cranston. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Have a great night, guys. Stay dry.
Aye.